Hello everyone and welcome to our demonstration video. So in the last 3 Excel demonstration videos, we've been covering pretty much the basic skills you need to navigate Microsoft Excel. So you learn how to put data within the cells and also perform some calculations with it. You also learn the functions and formulas to do more calculations. So make sure again you keep on practicing that part. And of course, there's also the charts and graphs in in your insert tab over here, in which you can visualize the data. So again, as mentioned, that's plenty enough for you to mark on your resume that, hey, you know Microsoft Excel. So keep practicing those skills. Again, you could just put in some random tables, make a random table, something from one of your assignments or in your own life, and start messing around with the different features we covered. Now in this video for Excel Chapter 4, we're going to be going over some extra skills. So this more has to do with how to format and organize our data. Excel does have some special features for it, and I'll be showing you some of them. Again, you may notice there are still a lot of buttons up here that we have not gone over. That's because, well, there's going to be still quite a bit that we need to cover. Okay, but for this, we're going to go ahead. So with this video, you'll see that this sheet here, rentals, we got some data going on, and usually we'll call this a table. So for us, we see this format as a table, especially when you do the stylings with the filled colored cells, and we also have our borders going on. Everything is organized within their rows and their columns. Perfect. Now if I go to this other sheet called Subtotals, you'll see that same thing. We have a table occurring. We have everything kind of organized as we would like and formatted as we would like. But you'll notice with these columns, we have little arrows down here. Little arrows down with each column. This feature, and you'll also notice these cells are alternating colors, unlike this sheet over here. I did not do these alternating colors on my own. I did not have to go through each one and do the fill color. This is because this table is formatted as a table by Excel. So Excel has been told that this is a table. Now, when that happens, that means that Excel can provide us more features that we could do. For instance, these little arrows is for sorting. And there's a lot more we could do when we tell Excel this is a table. Again, you may notice you could still do calculations if you don't tell Excel, hey, this is a table, but we'll be showing you how to format this data here as a table and some features that you could use with it. All right, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna click anywhere within this data. So Excel is going to be intuitive and see that this big block of data is probably related to each other somehow. I like selecting the first cell of the data, or at least the first header, so you could go ahead and select it. And you're going to make sure you go to your Home tab and then go to your Styles group. There's a button called Format as Table. You're going to go ahead and click on it, and you'll see it instantly gives you different styles that you could use for your table. So you could start it off there. You could hover over each style to see which exact name it is. But for me, I'm just going to select anything that I find nice. So for example, maybe I like this one right here, this medium blue. I'll go ahead and select it. And then we're going to get a little pop-up window, which is basically Excel wondering, hey, is this data the data that is a table? You'll see that there's a moving border around it. Just confirm that, yes, this is the data you want to tell Excel that is a table, that all this data is connected together with each other. If it's not showing the correct data or it's missing out on some columns or rows, just go ahead. You can get rid of the cells here and then select it yourself. And I highly recommend going in and selecting it yourself. So that's A4, 2, there we go, F30, perfect. Now, another thing to note, if you have headers, so you have titles for your columns, make sure that you select the checkbox for My Table Has Headers. Otherwise, it's going to see this as data. It's not going to see it as as titles, it's going to see it as part of the data, which could affect how things are calculated. So make sure you have that check mark if you have headers. If it's just the data itself, you could uncheck it. But we do have headers, so we're going to check it and then click OK. There we go. And now you could see this one doesn't turn it blue because this was manually formatted to be yellow. But now we have those little arrows associated with this data because now Excel sees it as a table. Perfect. You'll see that a new tab has appeared up here called Table Design. That only happens when you click anywhere within the table itself. So notice I could click into any cell. We still have our Table Design tab up here. But once I click out, that tab disappears. Go ahead and click anywhere within your table and go to your Table Design tab. All right. Now you'll see that there are different things we could do up here. We'll be returning to this in a couple of moments. But just know, if you did not like the style that you chose earlier, again, you could still format it like how you do with your Home tab. Let me go back to the Table Design. But you could change the styles here. So maybe if I don't like this alternating colors, that's okay. I could click the drop down and change it to, maybe I want to keep it as a yellow. Actually, no, that's going to clash with my header. Let's do grays. There we go. So you could still change your style. Something else that's cool, you'll see up here in the table style options, we have different options. For example, the header row. Make sure that the first row is indicated to be a header, so it gives it a different style. If I unselect it, notice it actually gets rid of my header row. Let me select it again. Now we have our headers. Same with the first column. First column indicates if maybe it's like certain categories that we want to emphasize. If I select first column, notice it bolds my first column, emphasizing that it is important categories. I could deselect it too. There we go. Indicate that maybe it's just part of the data. Banded rows is the alternating colors going back and forth. So right now it's alternating between two shades of gray. I could go ahead and unselect it and everything's just a solid gray. But usually, especially when you have a lot of data like this, you want to have banded rows. It makes it easier to read each row. Banded columns is the same thing, but between the columns. Let me turn off the banded rows and let me select banded columns. There we go. And you can see that the banded columns, they switch back and forth in the colors. Let's get rid of our banded columns and select our banded rows again. There we go. The one cool feature that we do have is a total row. So again, if we want to maybe add up all of our days rented last year for all of these locations, we could do a sum function right here. You could even use the auto sum down here. But let me click into my table again. Go to my Table Design tab. There is a button here in the table style options called Total Row, and if you select it, it does that calculation for you. Now in this case, it only does it for at least the last value, your last column, numeric column. So if you do need to do a sum again, you would have to do it down here. All right. So those are some cool things that you could do with the table. Again, you have different options up here. We'll be returning to it in a moment. But for now, go to your Home tab. Now, this feature, you don't need to format data as a table to do this, but it's highly recommended. It makes it easier. But we're going to be in our Home tab. Select anywhere within your table. Again, I prefer choosing at least the first data cell. You're going to go to your editing group and you're going to click down on Sort and Filter. Now what Sort and Filter does is it could organize our rows based on certain filtering features that we would like, or even sort them in alphabetical order. So if I do A to Z, there we go. Notice our table changes and now everything's going in alphabetical order based on the rental name. All of the data is still kept intact with each other, so each row has just been switched around to organize itself alphabetically by the rental name. Now another way to do that and to do it for specific columns are these little drop-down arrows. Notice this one has a symbol. That's because we did the filtering based on the rental name. But if I click on a drop-down for location and I do A to Z, There we go. Now it does it alphabetically based on just the location. I could do it the same with state. Do the drop down, A to Z, so ascending alphabetically. There we go. And now we have all of our rows organized in alphabetical order by the state. Now, what if I want to do states by alphabetical order, but I also want my rental names to be in alphabetical order? Well, that's when we go to our sort and filter button once more. And then you're going to go ahead and click the custom sort. There we go. Now, with a custom sort, we could do multiple sorts at a time. So it's kind of like if you're organizing something within a cabinet, you could do things, maybe it's a bunch of people's files, so you have a bunch of names, and you're organizing each of the documents alphabetically, and then maybe you're organizing each little section in a certain way that helps you. We could do that here in Excel. So you'll notice this here, it's saying sort by a certain column. We want to do it by our state first, so make sure you click on the drop down button and find state. There we go. You could leave the sort on values as normal. You won't need to be touching these soon, but this will just, if you want to look further into it, this tells you what exactly you're sorting by. So right now it's the actual values in the cell. These down here are if you formatted the cell itself to another color and such. So that is something else you could do. But again, for your projects, we're just going to leave it like this at cell values. And then the order, in this case, since it's detecting alphabet, it's asking, do we want it from A to Z, so alphabetical order. A to C is ascending, or Z to A, which is descending. We want it A to C, A to Z. There we go. So we've selected it. And then now again, I want to, within each state, I want to organize the rental names also in alphabetical order. Okay. To do that, you're going to go to the plus button, add level. There we go. And then you see that we get a new row. Let me expand this. You get a new row. And it's basically the same thing that we covered up here, but now it says then by. So we're going to sort first by state, ascending alphabetically. Then we're going to sort by the rental name, so this column here, with the cell values, also A to Z, so ascending. Now when I click OK, there we go. Notice the rows have shifted around for each of the states, and everything is alphabetized. So notice down, let's take a look. What's the largest group? There we go. Like over here, F comes before, did not select the right ones. There we go. F comes before W. And then here, L comes before S, and so on. Okay. Again, the sort and filter feature does not have to be when the table's formatted as, when the data is formatted as a table, but it is highly recommended. Let me click on the drop down again for sort and filter, do the custom sort. If you find, let's click on the drop downs. If you find that the columns are saying something else, or for instance, it has a bunch of column names that aren't matching up with what you were expecting, either you may need to format your data as a table, or take a look at the headers up here. If they have weird names, make sure you go and manually change them to what they should be. Okay. So that's utilizing some parts of a table. We're going to come back to something like this in a moment. But for now, let's do some quick things with our actual sheets down here. So again, our sheets is how we could organize different parts of our workbook. So this file again is a workbook, Excel workbook. And just like a book, it could have different sheets in which we could store more data. The sheet tabs are down here. So right now we're in rentals. I want to switch to subtotals by just clicking on it. And then I'll go to my text import. This is the page for it. This is the sheet. Let me go to rentals. If you want to add a new sheet, so a completely new sheet, you'll see that there's a plus button down here. You'll just select it. There we go, and a new sheet appears. And you could start editing data within it. Now when you create a new sheet, you'll see down here that it's given itself its own name, Sheet 1. If you don't want that, you could right click on the tab itself and you get some options. One of them is called Rename, and you could select it and then just give it another name. So in this case, maybe I just want to call it, let's call it New Data. And then you could just click Enter. There we go. Now, if I don't want the sheet anymore, that's all right. You could right click on the tab again, and you see that there is an option here called Delete. Once you click Delete, that data is gone. You won't be able to undo it and get that data back, so do be careful with it. But if I could click Delete now, there we go. Now it's gone. Perfect. So that's creating and deleting sheets. One other thing we could do is copy sheets. So let's say I want to do some calculations or edits to this sheet here, rentals, but I want to keep the original data. Now, of course, I could create a new sheet and then copy and paste all of these cells. That is something you can do, but sometimes that could change the formatting and calculations. What we're going to do is we're going to go down to our sheets. I'm going to right click on the rentals tab. There we go. And I'm going to go to the option Move or Copy. Go ahead and select it, and you will get a pop-up window that appears. With this window, the reason why it's called Move or Copy is because you could actually move sheets to another workbook. So if you have another Excel file in your folder, you could switch it over. You could switch this sheet over to that new workbook if you need it to be moved. But we're not going to do that in this course. What we are going to do is copy the sheet. So we want a new copy. We want a new copy over here. But to create a copy, you do need to check this box right here, Create a Copy. Excel does not check it for you by default. You have to check it yourself. If you don't do the check mark for Create a Copy, it's not going to create a copy. Okay. And then from here, you could leave it as is, but Excel has a weird feature where it's asking you to place the copy either before one of these sheets. So that's the selection here. If you want to move it to the end, so it'll be within next to the text import tab, then you could select that option. If I wanted to go before subtotals, so it'll go right in between, it'll go right in between the rentals and the subtotals. Then you could click on Subtotals, click OK, and look, we get a new sheet down here. This is called Rentals 2 because it's a copy. I'm going to switch back and forth to Rentals and Rentals 2, and you'll see they're both exactly the same. They have the same data, same calculations. There we go. So we got Rentals 2. And again, if you don't like this naming, you could just right click, do the rename option, and then we'll name it Copied Sheet. Click Enter. There we go. And it's a rename sheet. So that's how you could, again, create new sheets, delete them, copy them around, basically organizing them as you would like. Sheets are important in Excel. It does allow you to organize different forms of data, but it's still related within the workbook. All right, I'm going to be in my rental sheet, and I want to teach you something else that is most used within business applications. So in different business positions, there is something in Excel called a pivot table. And you've probably maybe even seen this within certain maybe resumes or job listings. But a pivot table, you'll see, is a cool tool that we could use to help form quick calculations. Now, to do this, there are several ways to go about it, but I'm going to just show you one for now. And this works when you format a table. You're going to select anywhere within this table itself and make sure you get that table design tab up here. Go to your table design tab. And over here on the left, you have a button called Tools. Actually, before we do this, something that'll make it easier, you'll see here on the far left, there is a group called Properties, and there's a text box called Table 2. Go ahead and select that text in there. We're going to delete it. And then we're going to call it Rental Days. No space. The table name is actually naming this collection of cells. So from A4 all the way down here to, I think this is F30. Instead of calling it A4 to F30, now this is called Rental Days. So that's the other cool thing about formatting as a table. We could actually name it. Cool. Now let's start with our pivot tables. So again, we're going to go to our Tools group, and there's a button called Summarize with Pivot Table. Go ahead and give it a click. There we go, and you'll get this window that appears here. Now the table range, notice it says rental days, so it's actually selecting our table based on the name itself. Otherwise, you would have to actually select the cells, and we know that that could be a little tedious. So naming our tables, naming certain parts of data can be very useful. You just put in the name, you don't have to worry about remembering the cells. Okay. Now, once the pivot table is created, we actually need it to go somewhere, which is what this part is right here. It's set to new worksheet, which means it'll create a new worksheet with the pivot table, which we don't want that currently. I want it to where you could see it, the data side by side with what we have here. So make sure you select existing worksheet. There we go. And the location is the cell in which the pivot table will start. I'll have you manually select it. So make sure you click within that text box for a location, and we're going to do it right at H4. So I'm going to actually select it, and then you could click OK. Now you'll see that a new window pane appeared. Let me see if I could expand it for us to see. There we go. This is called the Pivot Table Fields pane. And what this will do is allow us to configure different categories and different data to start making calculations. To start doing that, you're going to go ahead and each of these columns, notice it corresponds with the columns here in our data. You could go ahead and click on the check boxes and it'll start adding it to your table. For instance, let's go ahead and click on, let's say I wanted to start doing some calculations by state. So let me select state. Notice that it starts appearing within our table. So all of our states are lined up in a column. Cool. And then now maybe I want to do some calculations with the days rented last year. So let me select that checkbox. And you'll notice it's doing the sum of the days rented column based on the state. I did not have to use a function for this. I did not have to use a sum function. It just does it for me. And let's see, even if I edit the data here, nope, it seems like it doesn't do that. But let me open up our, there we go. There's our pane again. But this is a way to do some quick calculation when it comes to your data. You could just turn it off, on and off these different values in the pivot table. So yes, that means if I click on the rental name, there we go. It actually gives me the subtotals for each of the rental locations. And you could organize it here. This minus button means it'll collapse it. So now we just see the states. Cool. So now we have that going. If you don't want to see certain data's going on, so for example, rental name here, maybe we don't want it anymore, you could just deselect it, gets rid of the table. Depending on the orders in which you place the data, it could give you different calculations. So mess around with different orders, give it a try with especially a lot of data. Now, something else you could do, let's say, again, if I check on rental names, it gives me the rental names as categories and then gives me the sum of days rented, which is just grabbed straight from the data. But what if I don't want that? What if I actually just want to see how many rental locations are within each state? All right, let's uncheck rental names. In that case, we need to tell Excel that, hey, this is not a category, this is a calculation. To do that, we'll take a look down here. The main boxes we're going to take a look at is the rows and the values. Rows are the categories that are being evaluated. So notice when I check the rental name, the checkbox, it appears within the rows. Let me uncheck. Now the values is what we're calculating. So notice the sum of days rented last year is being calculated as the values. So what I want is the rental name. Since I want to calculate how many rentals are within each state, I want it to go in the values, which to do that, you could just click and drag it over. So let me select the rental name and then click, drag it over to the values. If you see a little green bar, that's telling you in which order you want the columns to appear. Maybe I just want it to be at the end, so I'll do my little green bar on the bottom. Let go. And look. This one, since you can't add up the alphabet, but you could see how many rental names are different, which is how we do the count. And now it gives me how many rentals are within each state. Perfect. So you could keep doing that. You could keep dragging to different row values, different values, and see what calculations you can come up with. Now, one last thing for the pivot table. Let's say we don't want to do a sum on the days rented. Maybe we just actually want to see the average days rented for each location, so each rental name. Okay, well, every time we click and drag the days rented last year to the values, it's going to be a sum. By default, Excel will do a sum calculation, but there is a way to change it and even change how your data looks. I'll have you select the column header for the data you want to change. So in our case, it's the sum of days rented last year. And I'll have you right click. There's an option here called Value Field Settings. Go ahead and select it. And let me bring this up here. Now, you'll notice this selection down here is the Summarize Value Field By, which means we could indicate the calculation we want to do. Right now it's set to sum. If we want the averages, the average is there. If you're looking for something but it's not in this immediate list, you could use this little scroll here or the up and down arrow keys to find it. But let's do average. This text box up here is the name of the header, which we could just change it to average days rented. There we go. Now I could click OK and it'll do my calculations, but you'll notice there's a button down here called Number Format. You could instantly start formatting the numbers here if you need some kind of currency, some kind of decimals. In the case of averages, if I actually clicked OK right now, it would give me decimals that go on and on and on, which I don't want. It'll kind of look ugly within the screen. So let's click the number format. Let me bring this here. And I'll go ahead and select the number category. If you did want some dollar signs or you wanted to indicate that it's some kind of monetary value, you would go to currency and accounting. And of course, there's a lot more you could take a look at. This is very much the similar formatting you're using within the number group in your home tab. All right, so it's going to be set to number format. And maybe the decimal places, I just want to keep it to, actually let's do 1. So you could use the arrow keys to change the decimal places, or you could just type it in. Now let's click OK. There we go, that sets the number format. And here in our value field settings, we'll click OK. And now it changes it to the averages instead of the sum, and it has our number formatting, including the grand total. Which that part's actually a little weird since this is an average, but you could always change the header here. Cool. When you're done with your pane, you could go ahead and click the little X specific for the pane. Don't click the X for your window. This red one here, that's going to close your window. You could click the X down here. Perfect. And there we go. So you could keep messing around with pivot tables. Again, I highly advise you mess around, see what you could come up with. Something else you could take a look at. Let me go to my Insert tab. In the chart section, there is something called a pivot chart, which quite honestly, it works very much the same way. You'll get the same pane, and depending on what values you choose, it will go ahead and also display the calculations it's coming up with, but in the form of a chart of your choosing. So also make some use of that. I can't go over it for this video, but there are plenty of resources that you could take a look at. And again, it's more or less the same as what we did here. It's just going to visualize it for you instead of putting it as a table. So pivot tables is a big skill to have. Let me show you one feature that Excel has for specifically formatting data. With that, we're going to go to our Subtotals tab. All right. So again, there are plenty of features provided for us to format data, but I can't go over every single one. The only one I can show you is something called subtotals. So you may have seen earlier, there are ways in which we could, especially the pivot tables, we could get subtotals for each state here. Maybe see the days rented for each one, and then we could still visualize what those days rented were for each location. There's another way we could do that with Excel, and it is called subtotals, but to use it, we need to make sure our data is not formatted as a table. So yes, sometimes having it as a table can actually interfere with certain calculations, so do make sure that you're taking a look at it first. But let's go ahead and turn this table back into just normal cells. So for Excel, it's going to look in normal cells, but for us, it's still data. Go ahead and select anywhere within this table. Again, I like choosing the first value. And then go to your Table Design tab. By the way, make sure you're in your subtotals sheet, otherwise it could start affecting calculations. There we go. And now to turn it back into normal cells, you're going to go to your Table Design tab, and there is a group here called Tools. There will be a button called Convert to Range, which range means cells. Go ahead and select it. Excel is going to confirm that we do want to turn it back into normal cells. We're going to click yes. And now we don't get our nice fancy features or formatting, but now we could use our subtotals feature. Now to start it, we're going to go to our data tab. And depending on how your ribbon looks, over here on the right, you're going to have a group called Outline. For me, it appears as a button because my ribbon is a little squished right now. My screen size isn't that big, but I could go ahead and click on the drop down for Outline, and you should get buttons that look like this. You're going to select the one called Subtotal. There we go. And it's going to give us these options. Now, before we get in these options, please know, depending on what subtotals you are doing, make sure you sort your table first based on those subtotals. So for us, we want to see the subtotals for each state. So if we want to see those totals just based on the states themselves. Make sure that it is organized as such down here. So use the sort feature. So by the state, you could do alphabetical or ascending, descending, but make sure it's organized. Otherwise, if it's all over the place, this will not work. Once you have it sorted, then you go to the subtotal window. And then we're going to indicate how we want these subtotals calculated. The at each change in is the subtotals we want. Right now it's doing rental name, which is not what we want. We want it to do it by the states. So add up by the states. So let's click on the drop down, select state. There we go. The use function is the calculation we're doing. Let me click on the drop down. Notice there's other calculations we could perform, but we do want a subtotal, so we want the sum. So let me click sum. And then now these add subtotal to options is what we are adding for each different category. This here, the average, we're going to just call that our revenue. Maybe we also want to do the days rented last year, so we'll just check that box. And if you don't want it anymore, you could just uncheck it. Now when we click OK, it'll do those calculations for us. So notice now we have new rows for each subtotal based on the states. There we go. And look, it even gives us a grand total based on everything. So it will do that for us too. Now, if you gave this a try and you notice that maybe there's two subtotals for a single state, so maybe you have maybe you have Kentucky and then you have another Kentucky below, that's because that will happen if you did not sort your table properly. So again, make sure you sort properly by state. This will only work if the states are clumped up like this. Cool. So not only does it do the calculation for us, it also provides us features with how to show these subtotals. Take a look here on the left side. You'll see that there's some little little squares with minus symbols in them. If I select this first one, notice it collapses all of my locations for this state and just shows the subtotal. There's a plus button now, so if I select it, it shows me the rental locations again. So I could do that for each state, just see each of the subtotals. Or you may have noticed these numbers up here. These are different levels. If I click 1, everything collapses and it just shows me the ground total. If I click 2, so level 2, it shows me the subtotals for each of the states. And if I click 3, it opens up everything. So now we can see all the rental names. So let me just do 2 for now. This is really nice if you want to still keep your data, but also maybe present this to someone. So if you're presenting this to a higher up or a team, now you have it very clean with just these subtotals. All right. So again, that is just one of the many things you could do with formatting your data, visualizing it. There's a lot of other features that Excel provides. I do urge you to keep exploring it. So everything within the Data tab, even in the Home tab, there's quite a bit you could do with formatting. Okay, the last skill I'm going to show you, we're going to go to our text import sheet with this. You may have noticed there is no data here. We only have a bunch of headings, but there's no numbers. I'm going to show you a file. Let me pull it up real quick. There we go. In your assignment, you're going to see a file like this, and you'll notice that it's not an Excel file, it's not a Word document. If you try opening it up, it'll look like this, which it starts looking like a table, but not quite. Kind of looks very messy. This is a text file, so you'll notice the name of the file itself ends with .txt. That indicates this is a text file, so it's kind of like a Word document, but does not have any of the fancy features. All it will hold is just letters, symbols, and numbers. That's it. No special bold, no highlighting, no colors, just text. Now it looks like someone has tried to put in data within this text file into a form of a table, but of course we have seen that just doing that within, let's say, a normal file is not going to be beneficial. We want to get this data from here to our Excel file. Now, you're probably wondering, Miss Ojeda, do I need to copy and paste each of these values into each of these cells? And I mean, you could do that. You could also directly type it. I've also seen some students that will copy all of this and paste it into, you could just paste it into A5 and it will try to sort itself out. But that could get messy. It could get messy and the formatting can change and you may have to do a lot more cleanup than needed. So how do we do that without having you type it all into these cells or copy and paste over and over again? Well, there's an import feature that we have on Excel, which means we'll get this data into here, this sheet, with the formatting we want. Let me close out of this text file. Make sure you close out of that text file if you did open it up. Otherwise, again, it'll be like doing surgery, brain surgery when the person's awake. Okay. Now, I'm going to select cell A5. So I want the data to start here, or at least I'm hoping that it will start here. And now go to your data tab, make sure you're in there, and look at your get and transform data group all the way on the left. These buttons are how you can get data from certain files. So you do need to indicate what kind of file you are using so that Excel knows how to read it. We have a text file, so choose this option here, from text/CSV. A CSV file is basically a text file that puts commas in between each of the data. Let me go ahead and select this button since it is a text file we're using. We'll wait for it to load in, and we have to actually find our file here. So let me go to my downloads, and let me go to my import text. There we go, select it, and we'll click the import button. And there we go, a new window will appear. This is confirming to us that, hey, is this the data that we want? Is it organized as we would like? And I could just click the load button and be done with that. I could just go ahead, get the data, and do it. But maybe there are some things we want to change. For example, these last two columns, column 7 and column 8, have a bunch of null values. All these values are null. That means that there is no value. Null means that there's nothing. Maybe I see that and I find, okay, maybe this data is unimportant, so I want to get rid of it. And maybe you took a look at some of these rows down here and thought, maybe I don't want that within my table. Maybe I also want to get rid of it. Of course, you could import your data and then start deleting columns and cells, but there is another way to go about that, and that is the Transform Data button here. Go ahead and select it. Oh, it appeared on my other screen. Let me pull this in. But you'll get this window called the Power Query Editor. What this is you could think of it as like a mini Excel that allows us to edit this data, or at least format it to how we want before we put it into our Excel sheet. So it's kind of like a preparation zone. You could, if your screen is small like mine, you could use the scroll down here to go between all the columns. For example, I'm taking a look at columns 7 and 8 now. And if you have a bunch of rows, you could use this vertical scroll to go up and down. Now, I want to get rid of column 7 and 8. To do that, I want to select column 7. So I like choosing the actual column itself, so selecting the name. And there's a button here called Remove Columns. I could click on the drop down and then click the button Remove Columns. And now column 7 is gone. Let me select column 8. And if I don't want this as well, I could go to the Remove Columns button. You'll notice the one above it is a simple button. So if I select it, it'll immediately delete it. Perfect. Now, something else I could do, again, maybe there's certain rows down here that I want to get rid of. I could select them and there's a button for deleting the row. But there's a quicker way to do that, especially if maybe there's certain states that we do not want to take into account. All right. There's a button here called Remove Rows, and it is a drop-down button. So go ahead and select it to find more options. And there's different options you could choose from. For instance, you could remove a certain amount of rows from the very top, starting at 1. And you can remove a bunch of rows starting from the bottom, so the very last row. Again, maybe I decided I don't want certain states down in the lower rows, so let me select Remove Button Bottom Rows. And then I just indicate how many rows I do want to delete. So in my case, maybe it's 9 rows. I don't want the last 9 rows. Click OK, and it gets rid of it for you. There are other things that you could do to prepare this data. Notice you could sort it here. You could even change the column names up here. Again, explore it how you would like, but for now, maybe this is enough for me. So I'm actually going to go ahead and start doing the process of getting this data into our Excel sheet. Go to this button on the top left, close and load, but make sure you click on the drop down part. So the one with the little arrow. Let's select it. Now there are 2 options. The first one, close and load, will actually get this data and add it to a new sheet. But I currently don't want that. I want that to actually go on this existing sheet here in the text import. So you're going to choose the option for close and load to, so to an existing sheet. There we go. And now you'll see that, there we go. So now you'll see that we get a new window, and it's asking us how do we want to import this data. So do notice that some of these start looking familiar. So we could import it as a table, so direct data. You could even start creating a pivot table or a pivot chart or something else. We won't go over this in this course, but for now we just want the normal data. We want it as the table as is. So let's make sure table is selected. And now down here, again, we don't want it on a new worksheet. That'll create this table into a new worksheet. If that's what you did want, you keep it checked. But for us, we want it to start here within this existing sheet. So go ahead and click existing worksheet, and you'll see based on what I was selecting earlier, it'll go ahead and start off that table, that imported data, right here at A5. Now, if it's not showing what you want, it's okay. You could go ahead and delete what's in there and then select it yourself. Again, I advise for these formattings, I advise you specifically select that starting cell. So I'm going to go ahead, click A5. There we go. And then now, click OK to import your data. There we go. If this pane appears here, you could just go ahead and click the little X to close the pane itself, so the gray pane. There we go. And now that data you could see is imported, and it's also stylized as a table, so we could edit how it looks. Now the only issue here, the only snag we came into is we have column names here, but the columns names right here were imported from that table, which column 1, column 2, column 3 is not very descriptive. That's okay. You could still edit each of these. So you could actually manually go into each of these headers and change it yourself. Or just real quick, let me show you a neat tool. Go ahead and select A4 to F4. There we go. And I'm going to use my clipboard in my home tab to do the scissors button, which is a cut. What I'm going to do is move the values in these cells to go down to these cells, so I don't have to type it over and over again. Let's select A5 to F5. So again, we had 5 cells horizontal. We're going to copy it here to these 5 cells horizontal. And I'm just going to do the paste button. So I'm not going to do the drop down, just a normal paste. Now those values are moved over. So there's a lot of things that you could do with importing data. And again, notice that I could still format it how I would like. I could sort it how I want. And even then I could still keep adding calculations. Like, oh, something I forgot to show. When you add new columns for your tables, you will notice that once you type in the header and you put a calculation, you'd have to do all of the formatting yourself to make it look a part of the table. But with the table formatting, I could just do a new column. So let me just call this new. Click enter, and it formats the entire column for me. And even better, if I start a formula. So let me just do, well, let's just do something random. We're going to get, so start out with an equal sign. We're going to get our days rented and multiply it by 100. Once I click enter, you'll see that it fills in, it flash fills that entire column with that calculation. I did not have to use the autofill. It does it for me because Excel has realized, oh, this is a table. If we do a calculation in one cell, we probably want it for the rest. And it was correct in that case. All right. So that's formatting your data. That's formatting and organizing. And again, there is a lot more you could do. I advise looking into, in your home tab, the 2 other buttons for your styles. I advise taking a look into those, especially the conditional formatting. This one can have some pretty cool visuals to see different data. So for example, let me see if I could find it. I don't believe it's here. Okay. But basically you could kind of, actually it is here in the icon sets. You could have it where it gives us a preview. Depending on certain values, you could give it a certain star rating. So something you could take a look into. All right. But for now, that will be it. Again, if you do run into any issues with your projects, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, have some fun with Excel. If you're ever curious about something, you could also still reach out to me. All right. Thank you very much and have a good one.